This is John Brown's fort. It was originally the Harper's Ferry Arsenal. It was built in 1848, and it was here in October 1859 that John Brown led his historic raid and was defeated. So let's take a look inside. This is inside where John Brown was holed up. Wounded and captured here by Colonel Robert E. Lee's U.S. troops. This recounts John Brown's historic raid on Harper's Ferry on October 16th to 18th, 1859. John Brown's last stand in the line of fire. And this monument denotes the actual original location of John Brown's fort. And in the background is where it was taken, I think, to a World's Fair and then disassembled and reassembled and put back here decades later. But this, in fact, where this monument is, was where the arsenal and John Brown's fort stood. This is the monument to John Brown's fort. This is the John Brown Museum. It's located in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, in the Harper's Ferry National Historic Site. And it commemorates John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in October 1859. Let's go inside and take a look at their collection. It's various photos, images of John Brown throughout his life. A series of illustrations of John Brown's raid. You can weigh John Brown's body well enough by how and in what balance weigh John Brown. It's from John Brown's Body by Stephen Vincent Bennett. Larger than life character, very divisive character. This is a good summary of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, October 16th, 1859. John Brown and an armed band of 21 men. The crisis. I hold God in infinitely greater reverence than Congress. John Brown. And this is a segment of the actual entry gate to the Harper's Ferry Arsenal, where John Brown was holed up in what is now known as John Brown's fort. John Brown, businessman, born in New York, lived in Kansas for a while. These shears belonged to John Brown during the 1840s. And this is a sword that was used in Bleeding, Kansas in the late 1850s, which John Brown was involved in. I believe in the Golden Rule and the Declaration of Independence. I think they both mean the same thing, and it is better that a whole generation should pass off the face of the earth, men, women, and children, by a violent death, than that one jot of either should fail in this country. And that's said by John Brown. And this is John Brown's family Bible. This is an illustration of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry and the point where they were holed up in John Brown's fort. The survivors, many of them injured, many of his sons were killed during this raid. And another segment of the Harper's Ferry Arsenal Gate. And amongst John Brown's raiders included Dangerfield Newby. He was 44 and he was the oldest of them involved. Ultimately, Robert E. Lee led a force of U.S. Marines to Harper's Ferry, and they cornered John Brown and captured him in the Arsenal building. Colonel Lewis Washington, he was one of the aristocratic elites in the Harper's Ferry area, and John Brown kidnapped him right away at the beginning of his raid. And of course, the impetus behind John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry was to capture the arsenal, the rifles, and hand them out to as many who would join him in the insurrection. This is the Kennedy farmhouse stove, and Anne Brown, John Brown's wife, and it was from the Kennedy farm that John Brown launched his invasion. It was just several miles east of here, of Harper's Ferry. In 1857, John Brown ordered 1,000 pikes. Probably already had this raid in mind at that time. John Brown himself fired this Sharps model 1853 during the raid in Harper's Ferry.
Men, get on your arms. We will proceed to the ferry.
These are the original doors of the Charlestown jail where John Brown was kept prisoner until his trial and execution. These pieces of scaffold are remnants from the gallows upon which John Brown was hanged, found guilty of treason. Okay, African-American perspectives on John Brown's raid. Frederick Douglass said in 1881, "Until this blow was struck, the prospect for freedom was dim, shadowy, and uncertain. The irrepressible conflict was one of words, votes, and compromises. When John Brown stretched forth his arm, the sky was cleared. The time for compromise was gone. The armed hosts of freedom stood face to face over the chasm of a broken union, and the clash of arms was at hand." Little more than a year after John Brown's raid, the Civil War happened. "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." And John Brown said this while he was in custody, December 2nd, 1859, and his words were prophetically true. This is the Industry Museum. It's located in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, part of the Harpers Ferry National Historic Site. Let's go on inside and take a look at the museum.
Meanwhile, a finger attached to the carrier's line causes the vessel.
So there was a lot of industry on Virginius and Hall's Islands before the Civil War.
A larger scale production version of this machine could produce a rumbling of one barrel in about 30 minutes, same result. This machine, like all the others, is powered by overhead.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
This machine turns the gun barrel into a perfectly conical tapered piece. The operator advances the metal cutting chisel against the skillet or barrel by turning the brass handle on the carriage. This enables the cutting chisel to begin paring or cutting the metal. Surface with each turn. Next, the carriage line between the feeding gear is set, allowing the chisel to move left or right, thus carrying the barrel to the desired conical form.
And some of the products that were produced in Harper's Ferry.
This machine was designed.
This is Philip Franklin Company, an old place to buy hats, caps, shoes, and boots. Let's go take a look inside. So, Philip Franklin Company operated from 1858 to 1860, just prior to the war. Clothing and accessories for men and boys. And recreated precisely the way it would have looked 170 years ago. This is the Master Armorer's house, and we're going to go inside and take a look at those exhibits. This is a railroad marker lamp from Virginius Island, about 1900. And Harper's Ferry was synonymous with industry and John Brown. And we're going to learn about that history. Harper's Ferry pistols. John Brown supplied some of his men with Maryland revolvers. Various items that were used during the Civil War, including a canteen, a cartridge bag, and a tin for eating. Cannonball and other projectiles. Some items related to Storr College, which is located in Harper's Ferry. A print by Currier and Ives, 1857. Transportation at Harper's Ferry, and located between the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, and with a railroad, and a canal, which is a model of one of the canal boats right here. Some items retrieved from an archaeological survey at the Hall Rifle Works in 1960. A fine collection of rifles. 6 of the most significant weapons produced at the United States Armory at Harper's Ferry. No spot experienced more of the horrors of war than during the Civil War at Harper's Ferry. At one point, Stonewall Jackson captured an entire Union army here. I believe it may have been about 10,000 men. Get on your arms and we will proceed to the ferry. John Brown's historic raid in October 1859. African American history, a place of struggle and triumph at Harper's Ferry. This is the dry goods store. We're going to go on inside and take a look. Just arrived, new and cheap, right from the Eastern markets. We got to check this out. Shelves are full. And a lot of items here sold, including shoes, linens, as well as hats. We're going to go inside the boarding house. Keeping the wolf from the door, Cornelia Stipes, a Harper's Ferry widow, and her 3 daughters ran this boarding house, which we have the stairs, but the upstairs is currently not open to the public. This is the office of the Provost Marshal, the military district of Harper's Ferry. We're going to go inside. Halt, show your pass. Harper's Ferry changed 8 times during the Civil War between the Union and the Confederates, most of the time under Union control. The Provost Marshal regulated military and civilian life and could jail, punish, and execute offenders. Okay, so we have a lot of uniforms and other equipment. Prisoner status. I'm sure there was lots of paperwork. I'm going to go inside the restoration building and see the foundations of an older building. Unraveling the past. And these are the foundations of an early 19th century building. And it was later built upon by a late 19th century brick building. The African American History Museum is closed for renovation. Yeah, these exhibits are closed for renovation. This is an exhibit on Meriwether Lewis at Harper's Ferry. He stopped here to organize his exploration of the Louisiana Purchase in 1802. Okay, tasked with exploring the Louisiana Purchase, Meriwether Lewis made one of his first stops here at the Armory and Arsenal on Harper's Ferry. And here he loaded up on plenty of supplies for his multi-month expedition. Some exhibits on a collapsible boat frame. And he made a collection of gifts that he can give away as diplomatic gifts to the Indians. And Lewis used this compass. It's a photo of the compass he used to chart their course. So President Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis on the exploration of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. This is the Whitehall Tavern, and they have authentic reenactors painting the owner of the tavern. Just hired them to paint the facility. We're going to go on inside and see what type of facilities and food they have to offer. It was on this spot on October 16, 1859 that Hayward Shepherd, a colored freeman, was mortally wounded by John Brown's raiders. He was an employee of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Became the first victim in this John Brown's attempted insurrection. This is True Treats Historic Candy in the historic area of Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. We're going to go on inside and check out what they have for candy, and we're definitely going to buy some. And we're going to take a walk inside the historic candy store. For the historic sodas, radios, banjos. Okay, historic candies, 1920s to the 1940s. Early 1900s. We're going to take a look at the exhibit in the confectionary. Casualty of war, German immigrant Frederick Roeder, prosperous baker. Sweets for Harper's Ferry. Everybody likes candy. And this is where you got it if you're in Harper's Ferry.
Well, I'm anybody, so, I'm not, but I should go back. I'm also should go back.
We're going to visit the exhibit on the 1862 Battle of Harper's Ferry during the Civil War. This is one of the Zouave uniforms. Colonel Daniel Cameron Jr. organized the Scotch Regiment. The 126th Regiment, New York, probably captured by Stonewall Jackson at Harper's Ferry. 32nd Ohio ran out of ammunition. Colonel Ford wrote a message of his desperate situation. This is an insignia of the 32nd Ohio. And some artifacts. This is a type of shell fired from the Union's naval battery on Maryland Heights. This is a topographical map. Maryland Heights to the right, Loudon Heights in front of me, Camp Hill, top of Harper's Ferry, and then Bolivar Heights beyond the city, all the high ground. Turning the tables. An opportunity for the South. Why Harper's Ferry? Strategic military significance. A good path to invade the North. The Union defenders, 14,000 at Harper's Ferry in September 1862 when Stonewall Jackson captured them. Mostly raw troops, never been in battle. Setting the trap. Special Orders 191. Brilliant campaign of Stonewall Jackson. This is the Storer College Niagara Movement exhibits. We're going to take a look at that. Abolitionist John Storer founded the school. Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave, a black abolitionist leader, and one of the first trustees of Storer College. Educate the colored children and white children together in your day and night schools, and they will learn to know each other better. And here on May 30th, 1881, in Anthony Hall, Frederick Douglass delivered a famous speech in praise of John Brown. Storer College and the Color Line. Despite the safety of school for black students, they could not always escape Jim Crow discrimination laws, the Ku Klux Klan marches, or news of lynchings. And these are the historic buildings of Storer College on the streets that they're located. Clash of the Titans, Du Bois versus Washington. Two different strategies on how to achieve equal civil rights for black Americans. John Brown Day at the 1906 Niagara Movement Conference, August 17th, 1906. All for justice, Niagara begins. Including a list of objectives for freedom. The battle we wage is not for ourselves, but for all true Americans. 1906 meeting at Harper's Ferry. We must prevail, the Niagara movement after Harper's Ferry. 1905 to 1909. One of the greatest meetings that American Negroes ever held, W.E.B. Du Bois, 1906, at Harper's Ferry. Weapons under fire. This is the foundations of Arsenal Square. It's one of two arsenal buildings here, built in 1803 and destroyed in 1861. And this one is the large arsenal foundation, 2.5-story brick building. And the foundations of the large arsenal building, part of the U.S. Arsenal. And in the background is John Brown's Fort. It's another arsenal building. Maryland Heights in the distance. For the deposit of arms, this was the small arsenal building. It was built here in 1806 and stood until 1861. It was one of two warehouses for the nearby United States Armory. And these are the foundations of the small armory building. We're going to make our way up the steps, the stone steps, to the cathedral. The Harper House, mansion on the hill. Robert Harper built this house in 1782. This is St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church. It was built in 1833 in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. These are the ruins of St. John's Episcopal Church. It was built in 1852, but abandoned in 1895. Thomas Jefferson visited Harper's Ferry in 1803 and commented on this rock. We've arrived at Jefferson Rock, overlooking the Shenandoah River and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And we're going to scan the view from Jefferson Rock.